Hey guys, thanks for tuning in, and welcome to the first ever New England Hockey News podcast. So, I decided to do this podcast for a couple of reasons. One, I had a lot of content I missed, and I figured this would be the quickest way to get it across to you guys instead of writing a ridiculously long post. And also, I want to see how making podcasts would go, so if I like this and if you guys like it, I might do some more. So let me know. In this podcast, I'm just going to talk about the recent games that I didn't write about, the last 4 games before the All-Star break, and maybe just give my outlook on the team once the All-Star break ends. So let's just get right into it. Before I talk about the Bruins, I want to give Jerry York a shout-out. 1,000 career wins in any sport is pretty impressive, but in college hockey, where you only play 40-something games a season, is a testament to how good of a coach he is and how long he's been around. I was actually at the game. He got his 1,000th career win, and it was pretty cool to be a part of, if you count being a fan a part of it. But nevertheless, like I said, cool to be a part of. Even though I'm not a huge BC fan, I like Jerry York. He seems like a really good guy. Great coach, obviously, and hope for the best of luck for him moving forward. So, now just getting into the games. The last game I talked about was the Bruins win over the Canadiens. A very good win, surprising, but good nonetheless. And then I wrote about the Canucks and how they needed to come out and play good in order to get the win. And they really did anything but. The game started out really bad with a questionable goal let in by Rask. Sven Barchi just got loose with some bad defensive play. He was all alone and he had one hand on his stick and poked it by Rask. Yeah, so there's not too much good things to say about that game. Something you'll see pops up again, but I really wasn't expecting this type of a game from the Bruins. I mean, after a very impressive win against the Canadiens, who, by the way, are just out of control right now, I thought they would string up a little win streak together, beat this team that they're clearly better than, and make a push towards the All-Star break, start racking up some points. But they really didn't do that at all. It was very uninspiring to watch. It seemed like the Bruins from early in the season in October, where they didn't really know what they were doing. They were just kind of skating around, hoping to score. And it was very depressing, I guess, to watch. Because you thought they would progress after a great win versus Montreal, but they did not do that. They got worse, it looked like. I don't know what happens, but they really shouldn't have let this game slip away from them. Just some stats about that game. Jimmy Hayes, Brad Marchand were the guys that scored the goals. Pasternak, Spooner, and Bergeron with the assists on all goals. Daniel Sedin was the star of the game, had 2 goals without his brother Henrik, which was a big storyline heading in. A lot of people thought this would affect the Vancouver Canucks, but it actually seemed to make them better. Alexander Burrows had the other goal, and like I said, Sven Barchi started the scoring off for Vancouver. So, in short, just a very lackluster game for the Bruins, something I didn't expect to happen, and something I hope doesn't happen again. Because they really should have beat this team. They beat them pretty handedly the first time they faced them 4-0 in Vancouver, and it should have been a similar outcome. So the next game was against the Columbus Blue Jackets, a team that has quite a bit of struggles this season. Even though they won this game, I would argue they played worse than against Vancouver, because this game should not have been as close as it was. The final score was 3-2, Bruins winning in a shootout, but it never even should have got to that point. Columbus is last in the league in points as far as wins, and and they're just hurting all around this season. I mean, they had a atrocious start. They went 0-8-2 or something like that. They fired their coach. They brought in John Tortorella, who I didn't think would do much of a job turning their team around, but they came out firing. I mean, they put a scare into the Bruins come the second and third period. I mean, the Bruins started the scoring off, scoring the first two goals, but then after that, the Bruins took their foot off the gas pedal and let Columbus right back into the game. I mean, it was all in the second period. I'm sorry. So after the first period, the Bruins were clearly better, but the second period they scored two goals and let Columbus tie the game back up, I guess you could say. It just didn't look like they cared about that game, and they thought it was going to be a cakewalk. And they shouldn't have thought that at all, because Columbus almost stole a game from them that would have been embarrassing to say they lost to. Brad Marchand, David Pastrnak got the goals. Ryan Spooner and Patrice Bergeron assisted on Marchand's goal. Krejci and Louis Eriksson assisted on Pasternak's goal. Yeah, I really don't know what to say about this game. It was just... It's kind of alarming to see, because when you see the Bruins play such a bad team like this, you'd think they would just romp all over them. Just end it from the start, not even make it a game, but they have trouble with teams that are worse than them, and that's going to be a problem, because these are points they desperately need, and points they need to make it into the playoffs. So let's just hope they can put this game behind them, take the 2 points, and just get a little roll through the All-Star game, which I thought they would do, again, after the Montreal win, and again after this win, but they started to do that, but then they failed. So just kind of wrapping up the Columbus game, Spooner, Bergeron, and Krug were the shootout participants for the Bruins. Spooner and Krug scored. Spooner was first, Krug was third. Krug had an absolute snipe. That was really cool to see. I think that was his second career shootout or something like that. And he fooled Korpisalo like it was no one's business. I mean, yeah, I really don't know what else to say about that. But so moving on, the next game against the Philadelphia Flyers, a team they've had a bit of a problem with this year, not being able to beat them so far. This game they needed to win, plain and simple. They couldn't let this team sweep them in the season series. They had to take away some sort of points, preferably 2 points, but I think a point they wouldn't have been too upset with, but I think the 2 points were absolutely necessary, and they got it. They beat the Flyers 3-2. Again, not their best game as a team, but they came away with the 2 points, and I think that's all they're really looking for at this point in the season. But now that I hear those words being said by myself, that's actually something that worries me, because if they're only focusing on the 2 points and not their game, they're going to get creamed if they make the postseason, because it doesn't really matter. Well, I guess it does, but they're going to face good teams in the playoffs, and they're going to have to improve their game if they want to beat these teams, because there's no way they're just going to be able to float through 3 periods, play hard for the last 10 minutes of the third, and beat teams in the playoffs. That's just not going to happen. So they're going to have to practice hard, improve their game play, and just make things happen at a more consistent rate, because right now things aren't going the way they should be, especially more than halfway through the season. So now getting into the game, Patrice Bergeron, Brad Marchand, Brett Conley with the goals. Now you might be thinking, Brett Conley scored? Yes, he actually did. His 7th goal of the season, off a tip from a point shot from Zdeno Chara, sealed the victory. Kind of something I wasn't expecting, to be honest, because Conley's had a pretty bad year, just to say the least. But Bergeron, Marchand, 2 guys that have scored a bunch this season, almost 40 goals together. Yeah, I mean, it was, like I said, not the best game, but they came out with the win. I think, like the Columbus game, they kind of took their foot off the gas pedal. They had a 2-0 lead after the first. They kind of got a little bit ahead of themselves, let Philly back into it, and then they had to sneak out a victory with a tip-in goal from Brett Connolly. Now, probably the biggest takeaway from this game was the offsides or non-offsides call that produced Wayne Simmons' second and game-tying goal. So if you're not familiar with the play, with about a little more than halfway through the third period, Wayne Simmons, or I forget who entered the zone, but someone entered the zone with the puck, and defenseman Michael Del Zotto straddled the blue line, and they dumped the puck in. It wasn't directly after this, but a few seconds later, Wayne Simmons ties the game for Philadelphia, sparking life into the Wells Fargo Center. Now, Bruins coaches thought they saw Del Zotto jump the line and go off sides, so now with the new rule of the coach's challenge, they used it and challenged the play that Del Zotto was offsides. Now, the Bruins haven't been too successful in this department this season. I think they've only won a handful, if any, coaches' challenges, but it looked pretty good after looking at the replay because, at least to me, I could clearly see that Del Zotto was offsides. Whoever had the puck crossed the line after Del Zotto's left skate was already in the zone. His right leg was in the air, and he was offside. Now, everyone, including announcers Jack Edwards, Andy Brickley, and some guy between the glass at Philadelphia, instantly said, offsides, no goal. So I was pretty relaxed at this point, I thought they would call it no goal, Bruins would hang on for the win. But once the referee came back on and announced that there was no offsides, and the goal counted, I don't know how to say this, but I got pretty upset. I mean, it was clearly offsides, it was clearly no goal, yet after a second look, the referee still made the wrong call. Now, a lot of people have mentioned that they have 9-inch screens to look at replays like this, so they don't really have the best viewpoint. But, I mean, it's not like this is their first review ever with those things. I mean, they've had almost half a season to get used to it, so why couldn't they see that Del Zotto was offside and that his right leg was up? So, Coach Julien was clearly upset after this. He was yelling and screaming at the refs on the bench, clearly visibly upset, and I would be too, but nevertheless, the Bruins held on, got the win, and got the heck out of Philly, because that was in the midst of the blizzard of 2016, and they just wanted to get out of there before some other bad thing happened to them. So, I think I already mentioned, yes, I did already mention, but the Bruins escaped with the win, and had one more game the next night against Anaheim before the All-Star break. So, a little bit about Anaheim. They've had a very interesting season. Predominantly a very good team in the West. They had a pretty bad start to the season. Not as bad as Columbus, but their stars were not producing from what they used to and what they should have been, and they were leaving their team out to dry. I'm not sure their exact standings, but they're, I think, 4th in the Pacific Division, and that's not anywhere close to what they should be. But nevertheless, they came in and dominated the Bruins in every aspect of the game. After Troutman's goal, 40 seconds in, it wasn't even close. Perry got the next goal for the Ducks, then Shea Theodore, the defenseman, then David Perron, then Kevin Bieksa. Chara got a little wrister in there, right into the third period, but then Ryan Kessler, empty netter, Mike Santorelli, another garbage goal. This was something that kind of depressed me also watching because I thought the Bruins would have a little more fight in them due to the All-Star break and due to the fact that this was a team that was pretty low on confidence and, well, was pretty low on, I don't know, swag, I guess you could say. They really didn't have the same swag as they used to. Their record is 22-18-7, but before they were 22-17, or 21-18-7. So I thought the Bruins would capitalize on a team that hasn't had the best season and make them pay for sitting around for 3 days in Boston. But apparently that worked to Anaheim's favor because they didn't look rusty or out of place at all. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, because of the winter storm, Anaheim was supposed to play Washington a few days before this game, but that ended up getting postponed, so the Ducks either drove or flew over to Boston, waited around for a few days, practiced at BU's Aganis Arena, and basically were waiting for the Bruins to get back from Philly to play. And some have argued that's an unfair advantage for the Ducks, but I mean, these guys are pros. They shouldn't have played as poorly as they did, and it clearly could have been a much closer game. Another kind of storyline to this game was Torrey Krug's fight with Chris Stewart. Chris Stewart has the height and weight advantage on Krug, and Krug fought him anyway. I think that shows Krug's heart and courage, but there's no reason Krug should have fought him. Just looking at the play, it looks like something Marchand would have done, and Marchand was actually in that scrum, but he wasn't the one fighting. But, I figured this would be a point in the game where the Bruins would respond, would get some life out of it. One of their little guys, one of their most skilled guys, fighting a guy that has primarily been a grinder most of his career. Nothing too special, but it seemed to put more life into the Ducks bench more than the Bruins, because that seemed to be the turning point of the game. The Bruins couldn't respond after that. The Ducks were all over them, and it was basically over. As a whole, this game was hard to watch. Like I said, I thought they would have more life in it. I thought it would be more exciting, but like these past couple of games, it's been hard to watch. It's been boring. It's been uninspiring because you'd think, like I said, with the All-Star break, they'd give it up their all and then have 4 or 5 days rest. But they didn't do that at all. They just let teams, they let Vancouver, they let Anaheim come into their building and beat them. And if you want to argue, or if you want to debate, they could have won all 4 games leading up to the All-Star break. I would argue they couldn't beat Anaheim. I think they're doing, this kind of contradicts what I said earlier, but I think the only game they should have lost was this one. Let's just say that. So yeah, I mean, their current record is 26-18-5. They're doing okay in their division. They're 4th right now behind Tampa, Detroit, and the Florida Panthers, who are somehow still first place in the Atlantic Division. But I'm not all too surprised about where they are right now. I thought they'd be right around this point. 57 points total. They only trailed Detroit and Tampa by 1 point, so a win could put them in second place. I think this All-Star break is much needed. I think a lot of guys will benefit from this. Bergeron's the only one that's going to play, so he's not going to get any rest, but he's probably the only Bruin that can take the All-Star break and play after just fine. And just some notable other teams in the league. Montreal, who started the season incredibly well, is now behind the Bruins and currently have 52 points. Like I mentioned in my last post, this team is just going off the rails big time. I mean, without Carey Price, they have absolutely no confidence in their team. I mean, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but I've said this a few times before, but I do not think the Montreal Canadiens are that good to begin with. I thought they just had a really lucky start. I thought they were riding the coattails of Price and his amazing season last year. I didn't think they would be able to keep it up, but I also didn't think they would fall this far. I mean, they had a significant lead over everyone in the East and the league for, I think, a month, and then they've just fallen off the rails completely. Yeah, I really don't want to talk about them too much, but let's hope they keep this up because I would love to see them not in the playoffs. Um, Washington right now, top team in the East, 74 points, 35 wins, 8 losses. That's pretty remarkable. A lot of people picked them to be the team to beat in the East before the season. I wasn't completely sold. I'm still not a big fan of Ovechkin, but he's having another good year. They do, in fact, look like the team to beat in the East because they're just so far ahead of everyone else. I mean, the next closest team in their division is the Rangers with 59 points, so it's not even close. Florida has 63 points, but they're definitely not going to keep up this hot streak. They're going to falter a little bit. Pittsburgh, another surprising team. They're starting to turn it on now, meaning a couple games before the All-Star break, but I'm pretty sure they were out of the playoff picture for a few weeks leading up to these last couple games. Sidney Crosby and Phil Kessel have not had good seasons at all, and that hurts to say because Sidney Crosby is my favorite player. I wasn't exactly sure how Kessel would do in Pittsburgh, but I didn't think he would be this bad. I'm not sure his point total, but it's pretty low. He doesn't have as many goals as everyone thought he would at this point. People thought him and Crosby would light up the league with Crosby having 80-something assists and Kessel putting up 60 goals. I didn't know what to think. They're right around the Bruins in points and standings. They'll probably sneak into the playoffs. I'm not sure how big of a run they have right now or how big of a run they can make. But maybe this All-Star break can help them, and maybe they'll get on a little bit of a run. Now just a little bit into the West. Chicago, top team in the West. Not really surprising to anyone, I don't think. They have 70 points, 33 wins, 16 losses, and 4 overtime losses. Yeah, I mean, the defending Stanley Cup champs, everyone knew they were going to be good. I mean, they have the guy with the most points in the league right now with Patrick Kane. And that's been a pretty big surprise for me, considering what he had to go through in the summer coming into this season. If you don't know, I don't know how to say this, he had a bit of a scandal involving a party at his house and a young woman. Not going to get much more into that, but it was pretty big news for a few weeks, but then the courts and the lawyers basically threw the case out because there was not enough significant evidence. But it doesn't seem to have affected Kane at all. He's having a breakout monster year, leading the league in points, like I said, and could lead his team back to a Stanley Cup victory. I like the Blackhawks, but I'd like to see someone else win, and I don't mean the Kings. I would like to see another team win, preferably someone from the East. As long as it's not Montreal, but I don't think that's going to be a problem. They're probably not going to make the playoffs at this point, but who knows. Just looking at the standings, some other teams, I guess. Arizona. They were definitely not in the playoffs last year, I could say that. They're actually surprising. I mean, that Pacific Division is pretty bad. The Kings are in first with 63 points. San Jose is in second with 56 points, and then Arizona third with 53, but their record's 24-20. And the Bruins were a much better team both times they faced them earlier in the season. Anaheim follows them, but I mean, I think this team is going to be pretty good in a few years. I mean, you look at Max Domi, you look at Anthony Duclair. They have their stud on defense with Oliver Ekman-Larsson. Their goalie situation's not the best right now. They thought Mike Smith would be the guy. He hasn't really turned out to what they thought he would be. Louis Domingue, he's currently riding a little bit of a hot streak right now, but I don't think he's the guy they're going to lean on. But I hope they make the playoffs, A young team that can surprise some teams right now. I'm not sure who they would face. I kind of forget how the postseason standings work, considering the Bruins didn't make the playoffs last year, so I was kind of pissed off all through the playoffs last year. But anyway, it'd be nice to see Arizona make a bit of a run, shock some teams, maybe knock out a pretty good team in the first round, preferably Chicago. But in all honesty, it'll probably be St. Louis because they can't win anything in the playoffs. But yeah, I mean, I didn't expect this team to be in the playoff picture right now, and then I didn't expect them to have this good of a season. But yeah, hopefully they can make some noise in the playoffs, and hopefully they keep it up, because they got some teams right behind them. And let's talk about two other teams in that division. The Calgary Flames and the Edmonton Oilers, two of the worst teams in the entire league, with former Bruins either at the helm or on that team. So I'll start with the Calgary Flames. As all of you know, if you've read my post, I thought the Dougie Hamilton trade was the worst trade of the offseason for Don Sweeney. I thought that was the dumbest thing he could have done, and he did it. But it actually doesn't seem to have helped the Flames at all, because they are currently 21, 24, and 3 with 45 points. It's not looking like it's going to be a great year for Calgary. Even though the Bruins lost to them in their own building, they are a much different team than they were last year, even though they have many of the same guys. Their two notable additions were Dougie and Michael Frolik from Winnipeg, who's also not having a great year, another playoff team from last year. But I like Johnny Gaudreau, so I've been kind of rooting for the Flames ever since he's been on that team, but it doesn't look like they're going to make the playoffs this year, and that's kind of sad to see. But, I mean, it's kind of what, I guess it kind of works out for the Bruins, because they haven't made Calgary better, I guess. It's weirdly put, but, I mean, yeah. I'm not going to go back into the trade, but it's a surprising season for Calgary. I thought they would definitely be in the playoff picture and not in the cellar of the league. And now for the Edmonton Oilers. In a very familiar spot, they are last in the Pacific Division with 43 points. And I believe, yep, they are tied in a three-way tie for last in the entire league. So good job, Edmonton. You've done nothing this year. Attaboy, Chiarelli. Now, it probably isn't fair to say that, because this is Chiarelli's first year, and they had McDavid, but he went down with a shoulder injury like a month or two in, so he hasn't had the season people thought he would. But, I mean, how many more chances is this team going to get? It's annoying to see. If they get another first overall pick and do nothing with it, I think the Bruins should make some sort of trade. Get someone that hopefully can do something in a Bruins uniform, because that team's not going anywhere. I don't care what you say. This team's not making the playoffs for at least another 5 years. I don't care if you got McDavid and Sidney Crosby on the same team. It's not happening. They're just not a good team. They're a minor league team, is what I've described them as in the NHL. They just don't have enough good players. Nothing against Andrew Ference, but when he's your captain, there's a problem there. I mean, I liked Ference, but there's no way he should be a captain in the NHL. But, yeah, Edmonton, they're bad. What else is new? So, yeah, even though this kind of veered off from what I was originally going to talk about, I think this was pretty good. So, for the Bruins, like I said, I hope they stay kind of consistent. I hope they obviously play better than what they've shown the past couple of games, but I think they can make a little bit of a run if they get hot coming towards the end of the season. and I think they can surprise some teams in the playoffs. And I do want to touch on this. A rumor that has been very popular lately has been that of Louis Eriksson. Now, from what I've seen and heard, it sounds like Eriksson's going to be traded on or before the trade deadline. Now, to be brief, I don't agree with that at all. I think the Bruins should try to make things work with Eriksson here and not trade him away for a player we have no idea how good he's going to play in Boston. But if history serves me correct, they'll definitely trade him away and get someone that is not worth who they traded for. You've seen it first with Thornton, then with Kessel, then with Sagan. Bruins love trading away guys that can score. I personally don't understand it. I wrote about this in one of my posts earlier this year. I don't understand why they trade people that can score. I think Eriksson could be a big factor to this team heading into the playoffs. I think he could help them get on some sort of a run, but it seems like he's already gone from what I've read. They're just working out the details with some teams. The three teams that I've heard are in the running are all in the West, which are the Winnipeg Jets, the Minnesota Wild, and the Anaheim Ducks. Now, I will say, if we get an offer that we really can't say no to, I would take it. But I think it's better if Eriksson stays here and tries to help the Bruins make a playoff push. But it's probably not going to happen. Kind of upsets me, but it's also not too shocking considering what they've done in the past. The rumor is they're looking to package Eriksson with a prospect and or a pick for some sort of top 4, top 6 defenseman. It really should be a top 4 defenseman because the Bruins will be making another stupid trade if they just get a top 6. And if you're not entirely sure, top 4 means the top 2 pairs. Top 6 is all the defensemen, basically. Most people only play 6. Well, you can only play 6 defensemen. The Bruins have dressed 8 different defensemen, but that's just because they're the Bruins and they have no confidence in their defensemen right now. But some of the names being thrown around are Cam Fowler, Sami Vatanen, Jonas Brodin, Dustin Byfuglien, who else? Jacob Trouba from the Jets. I mean, yeah, those guys would help, but then again, you're trading away the guy with the second most points on this team. It just doesn't make sense to me. I think we should try to make things work for him here, but that's not going to happen from what I've seen. I will say, I can speak today, great. I don't think they should overpay him. I definitely don't think he's worth $6 million a year. He's currently $4.5 million a year in his current contract. So I think somewhere between 5.5 is a good price for him, but he's probably going to want more than that. And so the Bruins aren't going to pay up and give him what he wants because they never do. So yeah, I mean, that's just a big rumor lately. He's probably going to be gone sooner rather than later. Hopefully the Bruins get something useful in return and not some failed defenseman that lasts 1 year. I think that's going to wrap it up here, guys. So thanks for listening. If you want me to do more of these, leave a comment, message me, whatever, let me know. I'll be glad to do some more. This is actually pretty fun. So yeah, thanks for listening, and go Bruins!